So voters in France are set to go to the polls on Sunday for the first round of the country's presidential election. And President Emmanuel Macron has ramped up warnings to the French people as far-right Marine Le Pen ebbs further up in national opinion polling, with his own support seeing a slump after losing his so-called war bounce following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. With pollsters currently expecting the final race to be between Macron and Le Pen, what can we expect to see in the following weeks, and what could the outcome mean for France and indeed the world? Well, I'm very pleased to say that joining me now to discuss this is French journalist and commentator Nabila Ramdani, and I hope I got the pronunciation right. So tell us about the latest polls, Nabila. Tell us what's been happening in France.
Well, campaigning in the French presidential election ends today officially. And, pollsters and people all over the world have been looking at the polls, anticipating the results of the first round of the election. And the gap, it has to be said, between the far-right candidate Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron is closing increasingly. The incumbent head of state is slipping in the polls, with even a Brazilian poll suggesting that he could actually lose to Marine Le Pen. It's Atlas Politico data, which is suggesting that 50.5% share of the vote for her in the crucial second round will go to Marine Le Pen, compared to 49.5% for Mr. Macron. Now, there's another poll, the Opinion Way, which is the barometer poll of the polls, if you like. Meanwhile, it shows that Mr. Macron is on 26% in the 12-candidate first round, compared to 22% for Le Pen. Now, Mr. Macron would then go on to win in the second round, but only with 53% of the vote, compared to 47% for Marine Le Pen. But there's another poll closer to home, your home in the UK. YouGov published today that Marine Le Pen was actually, her voting intentions were up by 3 points, up to 49%. So this is a figure that is well within the margin of error, and so is in fact indicative of a possible Le Pen victory. But so it's all in the open, it seems.
So polls are one thing, I suppose, but really, are we on the prospect of Marine Le Pen becoming the president of France?
In my personal view, I don't think that would be the case, particularly in a country that has a very active history of collaboration in the Holocaust and has a very barbaric colonial history behind it, not least of all in Muslim-majority countries. A lot of people have been asking, could it be the third time lucky for Marine Le Pen, who wants to become the first female president? Remember, she was a contestant in 2012 already, and 2017 presidential election, and she has gone one better every time. So could she win the presidency this time around in what I would call France's elected monarch system? Well, remember, it took socialist François Mitterrand and the conservative Jacques Chirac 3 attempts to become head of state. So why not Queen Marine, the leader of the National Front? And there is a sense in France, a feeling in France, that Macron has been highly controversially spending most of his time chatting with Vladimir Putin. Meanwhile, Marine Le Pen has been getting stuck into the issues that are really affecting millions of ordinary people. She has been talking about the day-to-day grievances of average voters, notably the cost of living, the price of fuel, pension reform, and the like. So these are just the kind of issues that the mass anti-Macron protest movements, the Yellow Vests, focused on. And it has to be said that after years of appearing on TV screens, the big, boisterous Le Pen has become extremely popular, in contrast to the stuffy Macron, an ex-financial civil servant and a banker. So she's not only ditched her ogre father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, a convicted racist and a Holocaust denier, but she also ditched Frexit, quitting the euro, and such divisive issues. But it has to be said that the rise of Éric Zemmour, who has been another candidate on the extreme right, who has been convicted 3 times for racial and religious hatred, has made her look remarkably moderate. So yes, we have a quirky political system in France. The National Rally has less than 10 MPs in the National Assembly, in France's parliament, but the president is far more powerful than parliament in France, and Le Pen could pip Macron to the Élysée Palace. Now, if she were to win, it would, of course, create a political earthquake, especially in the days of Brexit and Donald Trump. But I personally would still absolutely be astonished if she was to win over 2 rounds. I think instead we are likely to see the first sitting president to be re-elected in 20 years when the 2 top candidates go head to head on the 24th of April.
Well, that's very interesting, because I was going to ask you about this so-called war bounce that was there initially, and you've said some people have seen the President Macron speaking to Putin, and they have been more concerned as to what has been happening in France. So I'm just wondering what impact the war in Ukraine will have on the presidential elections. If you could give me your thoughts briefly on that one, please.
Sure, I have to say that French elections are inevitably focused on France itself. But yes, a major event such as the cataclysmic war in the Ukraine is, of course, focusing attention on the election period. I think all candidates, pretty much the top candidates, have been criticized for their close relationship with Vladimir Putin. Emmanuel Macron, first and foremost. Some say it was a good idea that the 2 presidents, Macron and Putin, have been talking on a day in, day out basis. But political opponents have naturally used it to attack Macron, saying that he should not be fraternizing with an alleged war criminal while trying to end the war in Russia's favor. And of course, it's not just Macron who's been criticized. Marine Le Pen has also had a very close relationship with Putin over the years. She has taken loans from Russian banks to finance her politics. She spent time in Moscow with Putin. And we all remember the huge table between Mr. Macron and Vladimir Putin. But there was a very small coffee table between Putin and Marine Le Pen. So even though she's now criticizing Russia for its war crimes in the Ukraine, the other far-right candidate, Éric Zemmour, has even suggested at one stage that France needed a Putin-type figure. But all these candidates are now backtracking a bit, and they're changing the subject when Putin's name comes up. And it actually is a good excuse to avoid talking about world affairs and concentrate on day-to-day politics at home. And it's actually working in Le Pen's favor, as there is evidence of French voters who would rather talk about the cost of living than geopolitics.
So we'll be watching very closely what happens on Sunday, Nabila, but thank you so much for giving us the update from France. It'll be a fascinating watch as we see who's in the final 2 for the runoff for the presidential election.